Imagine a world hidden in plain sight, a world of sprawling cities, a world of immense earthen pyramids reaching for the heavens. This was not ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. This was North America, centuries before Columbus ever dreamed of sailing west. It was a continent teeming with people, cultures, and ideas. We often think of this land as a vast, untamed wilderness, an empty landscape waiting for history to begin. But history was already here. It was being written in the earth, in the rivers, and in the lives of millions of people. This is the story of one of its most powerful and mysterious chapters, the Mississippian civilization. Long before the first European ships touched the shores, a great cultural revolution swept across the heartland of what is now the United States. From the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, from the Appalachian Mountains to the Great Plains, a new way of life emerged. So, who were these people we call the Mississippians? They were not a single tribe or a unified empire in the way we might think of the Romans. Rather, Mississippian is a name archaeologists use to describe a shared culture, a common set of traditions, beliefs, and technologies that blossomed around 800 CE. This culture was centered in the great river valleys of the Midwest and Southeast. The Mississippi, the Ohio, the Tennessee, and the Arkansas rivers were their highways. These waterways provided fertile land for farming and connected distant communities. The Mississippian era was a time of great change. It began as people mastered a new and powerful resource, corn, or, as we call it, maize. This crop, originally domesticated in Mesoamerica, became the foundation of their society. It allowed for surplus food production. It meant that not everyone had to be a farmer. This surplus freed people to become artisans, priests, warriors, and builders. To truly grasp the Mississippian world, you must first understand Cahokia. This was not just a town, it was a metropolis. Located in what is now southern Illinois, directly across the Mississippi River from modern-day St. Louis, Cahokia was the heart of this ancient culture. At its peak, around 1100 CE, it was larger than London was at the same time. Tens of thousands of people lived in the city itself, with many more in the surrounding farming villages and towns that supported it. It was the largest and most influential pre-Columbian city north of Mexico, a true center of power, religion, and culture. Imagine standing in the Grand Plaza of Cahokia. It was a vast engineered space covering nearly 50 acres, leveled and smoothed by human hands. It was here that the life of the city unfolded. Markets, festivals, political gatherings, and sacred ceremonies would have filled this space with sound and color. Surrounding the plaza were the great mounds, immense earthen structures that dominated the skyline. The largest of these structures, known today as Monk's Mound, is a testament to their ambition. It is a colossal four-terraced pyramid that remains the largest prehistoric earthwork in the Americas. Covering over 14 acres at its base and rising 100 feet into the sky, it was built entirely by hand. Baskets of earth, one by one, carried by thousands of laborers over generations. The mounds are the most visible legacy of the Mississippian people. But how did they build them, and why? It was a monumental undertaking, requiring immense organization, labor, and a shared sense of purpose. These were not random piles of dirt. They were carefully engineered structures built with different types of soil, clay, and sand to ensure stability and drainage. The process was simple yet staggering in its scale. Workers would dig earth from borrow pits, often creating large depressions that later filled with water, and carry it in woven baskets on their backs, load by load, to the construction site. There were several types of mounds, each serving a different function. The most common were platform mounds. These were rectangular, flat-topped structures that served as elevated bases for important buildings. The homes of the elite, temples, or council houses were built on top of these platforms, literally placing them above the rest of the community. This was a physical representation of the social hierarchy. The higher you lived, the more important you were. Other mounds were conical or ridgetop in shape, and these often served as burial places for important individuals. At Cahokia, one such mound, known as Mound 72, revealed a startling discovery. Archaeologists unearthed the burial of a powerful chief, laid upon a cape of over 20,000 marine shell beads shaped like a falcon. He was not alone. He was surrounded by the remains of hundreds of other individuals, many of whom appear to have been sacrificial victims. So, what was it like to be an ordinary person living in a Mississippian town? Well, for most folks, life really revolved around the rhythms of agriculture. The day would start early, with the sun just rising over the river valley. The staple food was maize, but honestly it was supplemented by a rich variety of other crops. They grew beans and squash, which, when planted with maize, formed what's called the Three Sisters, a nutritionally complete and sustainable agricultural system. They also cultivated sunflowers, gourds, and, a variety of other native plants. Farming was hard work, done with simple tools like stone hoes and wooden digging sticks. Families lived in pretty modest homes, typically rectangular or circular structures made of a wooden pole frame, with walls of woven cane and grass covered in a plaster-like mixture of clay and straw called daub. The roofs were thatched with long prairie grasses. Inside, a central hearth would provide warmth and a place for cooking. Life was definitely communal. Homes were often clustered together in small neighborhoods or compounds, probably based on kinship groups. Daily tasks would have been shared. Women were primarily responsible for farming, processing food, making pottery, and raising children, while men hunted, fished, conducted trade, and served as warriors. Religion and ritual were really woven into the fabric of daily life, not just reserved for grand ceremonies at the mounds. The Mississippians were not isolated. They were connected by a vast and intricate network of trade routes that crisscrossed the continent. The rivers were their superhighways, allowing them to move goods and ideas over immense distances. From Cahokia, a trader could travel by canoe down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico, or up the Ohio and Tennessee rivers deep into the Appalachian Mountains. This trade brought exotic materials and goods into the heartland, items that served as markers of status and power for the elite, and were essential for religious ceremonies. What did they trade? From the Gulf Coast came lightning whelk and conch shells, which were carved into intricate cups, pendants, and gorgets depicting mythological scenes and figures. From the Great Lakes region came copper, hammered into thin sheets and fashioned into emblems and ornaments. From the Appalachian Mountains came mica, a shiny mineral that was cut into elaborate shapes. Their technology was perfectly adapted to their environment. Without metal for tools, they relied on stone, bone, wood, and shell. Pottery was essential for storing food and water, and Mississippian potters were true artists, creating a wide variety of vessel shapes and decorating them with incised lines, pigments, and sculpted effigies of animals and human heads. The Mississippians were sophisticated environmental managers. They understood the floodplain ecosystem intimately. To truly appreciate the accomplishments of the Mississippian culture, it helps to place them in a global context. While Cahokia was reaching its zenith around 1100 CE, what was happening elsewhere in the world? In Europe, this was the High Middle Ages. The Normans had conquered England, the First Crusade was underway, and great stone cathedrals were beginning to rise. Yet, cities like London and Paris were smaller and likely less organized than Cahokia at the same moment in time. Across the globe, other great civilizations were flourishing. In China, the Song dynasty was a period of incredible technological innovation, producing gunpowder, movable type printing, and a vast navy. In the Middle East, the Islamic Golden Age continued, with cities like Baghdad and Cairo as centers of learning and science. In the Americas, the Mississippians were not alone. To the south, in what is now Mexico, the Toltec civilization held sway, and further south in the Andes, the predecessors to the great Inca Empire were building their own complex societies. What makes the Mississippians remarkable is that they achieved their complexity largely in isolation from these other Old World centers. They developed their own unique systems of agriculture, governance, and monumental architecture without the benefit of wheeled vehicles, draft animals like horses or oxen, or metal tools like iron and bronze. Their ability to construct something on the scale of Monk's Mound using only human labor and baskets of earth is a testament to their social organization and sheer determination. No civilization lasts forever. The great city of Cahokia began to decline after about 1250 CE. People started to leave. The once bustling plazas grew quiet. The great defensive palisade was not rebuilt. By 1350, the city was largely abandoned. Why this happened is one of the great mysteries of American archaeology. There was no single cause, but likely a combination of factors that led to the unraveling of this great center. It was not a sudden collapse, but a long twilight, a slow fading of power and influence over several generations. One likely culprit is environmental stress. After centuries of intensive farming and logging, the landscape around Cahokia may have been pushed to its limits. Deforestation could have led to increased erosion and more destructive flooding. There is also evidence from tree rings and river sediments of a significant climate shift during this period, a little ice age, which could have led to shorter growing seasons and crop failures, creating social and political instability. Social and political factors were also at play. The concentration of so many people in one place could have led to problems with sanitation, disease, and social friction. The rigid hierarchical system, which demanded so much from the common people in terms of labor and tribute, may have become unstable. People may have simply voted with their feet, leaving the troubled city for smaller, more sustainable communities. Though Cahokia faded, Mississippian culture did not disappear overnight. It transformed. Power shifted to other regional centers, like Moundville in Alabama and the Etowah Mounds in Georgia, which continued to thrive for another century or more. The fundamental ideas of Mississippian life, the mound building, the maize agriculture, the core religious symbols, persisted. But the era of the great metropolis was over. When the first Europeans arrived in the Southeast, they did not find an empty wilderness. They encountered the direct descendants of the great mound-building civilizations. Peoples like the Natchez, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Creek, and many others were still living in towns, farming maize, and maintaining societies that carried the clear echoes of their Mississippian past. The Natchez, for example, was still ruled by a paramount chief called the Great Sun, who lived in a temple on top of a mound. The old ways had changed, but they had not vanished. The legacy of the Mississippians is written across the American landscape. Thousands of their mounds still exist, silent reminders of a forgotten age. They stand in our state parks, on our university campuses, and sometimes hidden in plain sight in our farm fields and towns. These sites are more than just archaeological curiosities. They are sacred ancestral places. For many modern Native American nations of the Southeast, these mounds are a direct and vital link to their heritage. The Mississippians also leave us with mysteries. We have deciphered much, but so much remains unknown. We do not know what they called themselves or what languages they spoke at Cahokia. We can only guess at the full meaning of their intricate symbolism. The precise reasons for the rise and fall of their greatest city are still debated. Each new excavation, each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, but the full picture remains tantalizingly out of reach. This sense of mystery is part of their power, inviting us to keep asking questions and to keep exploring the deep past. Ultimately, the story of the Mississippian civilization enriches and complicates our understanding of America. It reminds us that this continent has been the stage for complex societies, great cities, and profound historical movements for millennia. It challenges the myth of a virgin land and replaces it with a more accurate and fascinating story of a landscape shaped by human hands and ideas for thousands of years. The echoes of their world are still here, in the earth beneath our feet and in the heritage of their descendants. We only need to learn how to listen,